Everybody, it's about 9:01. We'll get started here. Appreciate you joining us this morning. My name is Eric Hayden. I'm a meteorologist with the Weather Service in Morehead City, North Carolina. This is the radar loop of Idalia making landfall in the Big Bend of Florida. Really thinking about those folks down there, what they're going through. The reason why I'm showing you this radar image, it's just one radar out of Tallahassee, is to continue to emphasize the point that even though the track of Idalia, in terms of the center of the storm, is projected to remain near or just south of our coastline. We always say this: hurricanes are not a dot on a map. So heavy rainfall extending well into southeast Georgia at the moment. Just want you to see this perspective so that when you see the forecast cone and you see our forecast, that you focus on the impacts, not necessarily where the exact path of the storm will be. So we'll start things off. You should have this briefing. Ryan Ellis, our Science Operations Officer, created this morning. So this has all been sent out. So you should have this in your inbox. For those just joining us, if you weren't on the webinar yesterday evening, you can ask questions through the webinar feature or raise your hand, and we will certainly take those at the end if you've got any questions or concerns. Want to start off with this. We started messaging this last Friday, late Friday morning. Still seeing impacts from distant Hurricane Franklin, a major hurricane, so we continue to see the swell at our beaches. So still concerned with rip currents through the rest of today. In addition, beach erosion and overwash at those high tide cycles. Again, that would be primarily 8 o'clock this evening, and again 8 a.m. tomorrow. That's nothing to do with Idalia. That is totally to do with the swell from Franklin. A little bit of good news, and I would appreciate anybody can comment in chat if you're getting some issues up on the Outer Banks. That really helped out yesterday evening to hear what is happening. This is a graph in Duck. You peaked yesterday evening, and that's when you had a lot of those issues all the way down through Ocracoke, Hatteras Island, Rodanthe, Beth Midget, Drew, and Sam Walker were some folks that let us know about that. The thing I want to point out is this next high tide cycle is expected to be much lower. The next two, which will be this evening and also tomorrow morning, those water levels are similar on our forecast, but there's a huge difference in the swell. Yesterday evening, our swell was 13 or 14 seconds for the period, and that is a tremendous amount of energy. The swell period is down to 11 or even 10 seconds as of this morning. So even though the water levels are the same the next two tide cycles, the impacts may not be as much because that swell energy from Franklin is moving away. Then as we get into Idalia, that's why we have these higher levels Thursday night into Friday. So they are two separate things. Want to make sure you understand that with regards to the coastal issues that you're seeing now. It's nothing to do with Idalia. So for our overview, rain, 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 water, water, water. Anytime we get a chance to message this, this is our biggest impact. Still concerned with significant flash flooding, urban flooding from the heavy rainfall, tornado threat, and surge. Those are by far our three biggest threats with Idalia. Wind, it's gonna be breezy across the area, but the strongest winds, especially coastal areas and the Outer Banks, scattered power outages, but wind does not look to be a major issue with this storm, and certainly significant impacts to marine areas. Forecast track has sped up a little bit, which is good news for us. The impact's still about the same. We were asked some questions yesterday about, farther out down the line into the ocean. There is still a lot of uncertainty what might happen later Friday into the weekend. But for now, as the storm is at its strongest, approaching the South Carolina, North Carolina coastline later tonight as a strong tropical storm, that forecast track has remained relatively the same. You'll notice the cone continues to get more narrow. That is because we're closer, we're more confident of where the storm is going to go. But again, this only shows where the center of the storm will go. It does not show impacts. So even though most of eastern North Carolina is not in the cone, this is just for the impacts themselves, or the center. It doesn't show the impacts, and that's why we try to follow up quickly with these graphics. Flooding rain is our biggest concern. The area is highlighted in red, has been expanded a little bit. We're continue to creep this a little bit more to the north and west. Not so much because of huge track changes. This is just us refining the forecast. I know that the track can wobble here and there, but this is just, we're putting in more detail, more confidence that those red shaded areas are our biggest concerns. And you can see why. On average, 3 to 8 inches all across eastern North Carolina. but we are concerned that we might have higher amounts, as much as up to 10 inches possible. And like what we've seen with past storms, this is where we think the highest amounts are going to be right now. Kinston, Jones County, Onslow, from Duplin County up through the New Bern area and southern Hyde. So that's the axis of the heaviest rain. Can it shift 20 miles to the north and west and it's closer to Greenville? Yes. Could it shift back toward the Crystal Coast, Morehead City, Jacksonville area, down through Topsail Beach? Yes. Just know that anywhere really in the general vicinity of this bullseye is at risk for that heavy rain. So don't let your guard down and just look at that number and think, I'm out of the woods. That's where we think the heaviest rain will be now, but ultimately it's where those bands set up just to the north and west of the center of the storm. Storm surge impacts are largely unchanged. We are going to see some swell from Idalia, but not significant on the Crystal Coast. You probably toward the lower end of this range, but 1 to 3 feet up the White Oak. Places like the Bogue Sound area with the northeast wind, we will have some elevated water levels right on into the weekend with the persistent wind. But by far our biggest impacts for storm surge are on the lower Neuse River and the southwest part of the Pamlico Sound. So down East Carteret County, Cedar Island, up the Neuse River, places like Cherry Branch, Manasquan Beach, on the southern part, Harlow, those areas, we'll see potential for 2 to 4 feet above normally dry ground. And then also up the Pamlico and Pungo rivers as well in terms of surge. As far as the Outer Banks go, most of the sound side issues, if we have them, would be down toward Hatteras and Ocracoke on a northeast wind that is more favorable for the lower part of the Pamlico Sound, but still we will have some elevated water level rises there, probably on the lower end of the 1 to 3 feet. Our 1 to 3 feet projection for Oceanside is from the swell from Idalia and also the strong winds that we expect on the especially the northwest side of the storm. Winds will start to pick up tonight, but we're really thinking the strongest period of wind will be Thursday afternoon and Thursday night, and that's where we'll see those higher water levels in terms of the highest values. The Thursday evening tide cycle especially is our biggest concern around 9 o'clock, and then Friday morning at 9 a.m. That's when we think the water will be at its peak in terms of surge. With a persistent northeast wind, it's not going to go down right away. It's going to remain elevated through Friday evening into the day Saturday. But again, the peak water levels would be Thursday evening high tide cycle and Friday morning high tide cycle. Tornado threat with any landfalling or near landfalling system, any tropical system, we're concerned with tornadoes. The rain bands that we're most concerned with in terms of tornadoes would be closer to the coast. So the highest threat is down in these orange shaded areas. Please ensure people have multiple ways to receive warnings, because this will occur anytime later this afternoon, tonight, through the day tomorrow. As far as wind speeds go, time of arrival could have some gusts later tonight, but really thinking during the day on Thursday, and that core of the wind will come across our area Thursday afternoon through Thursday night. That's when we expect the strongest period of winds to be. As far as values, this is largely unchanged. Breezy conditions inland, 30 to 40 mile per hour winds. We can handle that. Could they produce some scattered power outages, especially with those rainfall amounts in a saturated ground? Yes, but we don't anticipate widespread problems with those tropical storm force winds. The core of the wind is definitely toward coastal areas, 40 to 50, anywhere from North Topsail Beach, Morehead City, up through all of the Outer Banks. This is on a northeast flow, so that will keep those water level rises occurring again through Friday morning and then remaining right on into the weekend. So some key takeaways, and then we'll turn it over to you for any questions. Confidence is high that this event is going to occur. We should start to see some impacts later today, but especially tonight through the day on Thursday. Tornadoes are possible, really highlighting that significant flood threat, urban and flash flooding possible. I didn't mention it on the river flood situation. I'll show you a graph on that in a second. And again, we mentioned those surge values, especially on the lower Neuse River and on the southern part of the Pamlico Sound. Some housekeeping, we anticipate another briefing sent by 6 o'clock this evening, and we will also do our next webinar then as well. So I want to hop out real quick. I forgot to show the river flooding. So we got some questions yesterday evening. Based on the current projections, significant flash flooding and urban flooding is expected. As far as the river flooding goes, with the rain that we had earlier in the week, and then also the current rainfall projections approaching perhaps minor stage, Chinquapin, the Northeast Cape Fear River. If we see some of that heavier rain shift just a little bit farther to the north and west, in the worst case scenario, potentially as we get into the weekend, we could be approaching moderate stage. So that's something that we're certainly watching. Once we get those values in the rivers, we'll have a better handle on it. But right now, the best forecast is minor flooding, and the worst case scenario would be potential for moderate flooding on area rivers. So at this point, I'll turn it over to you for any questions. And like I said, later today, we will have another webinar, and we certainly can answer questions at that time as well.